Tonight we ease onto a warm stretch of sand, the kind that clings to your toes and makes you instantly reconsider every decision involving socks. A narrow trail of lanterns flickers ahead of you, their flames trembling in the salty breeze as if they're trying to warn you that you're about to step straight into the 19th century Hawaiian shoreline, where the nights are long, the stars are bossy, and you probably won't survive this without at least a few mosquito bites. The air is thick with the scent of limu and the faraway hush of waves folding themselves against stone. Every sound feels magnified, as though the island wants to make sure you're paying attention. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You follow the lanterns toward the water, their glow bobbing like curious fire spirits leading you towards some secret gathering. The present tense wraps around you like a warm lei, and suddenly your shoes feel a little too modern for where you're going. You trudge across the sand, listening to the soft crunch beneath each step, and you sense that the shoreline itself remembers footsteps like yours, travelers, workers, families, moving through centuries of fishpond life. A breeze brushes your cheek, carrying that unmistakable briny sting. It's the kind of smell that reminds you the ocean is not shy about invading your personal space. Above you, constellations glitter with an almost smug confidence, and you have to admit, skies like these could make even the most committed night owl rethink indoor hobbies. You draw closer to the glimmering water, and the first thing you notice is the stillness. Not stagnant, not dead, just quiet, like the pond is holding its breath. Hawaiian fish ponds, loko, aren't just oversized puddles with delusions of grandeur. They are some of the most remarkable examples of ancient aquaculture in the world, and by the 19th century they've already been shaping island life for hundreds of years. One mainstream historical fact slides into your mind. These ponds date back well over a millennium, crafted with astonishing engineering for their time. You crouch, fingertips grazing the cool surface. Ripples wobble outward, merging with the reflected lantern light until the whole pond seems to pulse like a giant heart. Some pond keepers historically used crushed coral as a sort of ancient water brightening method, believing it helped reflect sunlight and boost algae growth. Early Hawaiian aquaculture, now with bonus mood lighting. The lanterns sway again, urging you onward along the shoreline where the pond meets the sea. The stones beneath your feet shift from soft sand to smooth rock, carefully placed long before you arrived. As you walk, you catch faint sounds of movement, someone adjusting a gate, maybe, or a fish flicking through weeds. You wonder how many hands tended this pond before your imaginary arrival tonight. Historians still argue whether certain construction styles originated independently on different islands or whether specialized builders traveled between chiefdoms, sharing techniques like ancient contractors with way better tans. You keep moving, letting the night wrap you in its rhythm. The lanterns illuminate just enough of the shoreline to make you comfortable while leaving the rest temptingly mysterious, like a museum that forgot to turn off its do not touch alarms. You wander along the curving path, tracing shadows that stretch across tidal pools. Your senses fill with the chorus of nocturnal life, chirping insects, distant calls from seabirds, and the soft thump of your heartbeat syncing with the pulse of the island. Ahead, the lantern line thickens, clustering near the pond's main entrance. It's the sort of setup that screams something important is happening, though nobody bothered to put up a sign. You move closer, the stones now dotted with small tufts of grass that tickle your ankles. A frog croaks somewhere behind you, loudly enough to feel like commentary on your walking posture. The shoreline grows busier. Workers, 19th century pond keepers, move with quiet confidence, their shadows elongating across the water. You pause to watch a group tighten a woven net, their hands moving with practiced ease. They don't seem to notice you, though you're fairly sure your modern sneakers are making a spectacle of themselves. One worker dips his hand into the pond, lifts it, and lets the water stream back down his wrist in a shimmering ribbon. He's testing temperature, current, clarity, reading the pond like a living manuscript. You stay back a respectful distance, because let's be honest, barging in with your 21st century energy would be like interrupting a yoga class with a leaf blower. A gentle gust nudges you again, and you swivel your gaze across the darkened horizon. The ocean beyond the pond roars softly, a reminder that while this sheltered water feels tame, its wild parent is always waiting. Waves shatter against lava rock, each one a rolling punctuation mark in the night. You wander further along, finding a spot where the pond's edge curves like a crescent moon carved into the land. Here the water sits quieter still, as though this corner is meant for whispered conversations. The lantern light filters through palm fronds overhead, creating that mesmerizing dappling effect that interior designers attempt and usually fail to replicate. You sit for a moment, letting the atmosphere soak into your bones, warm, salt-scented, layered with the echoes of countless nights like this one. Behind you, the workers continue their preparations, murmuring softly to one another. You can't make out the exact words, but you hear the cadence: focus, awareness, respect for the ocean and its gifts. A small crab scuttles past your foot, stopping dramatically as though demanding acknowledgement. You nod. It proceeds with the energy of someone offended it wasn't offered a speaking role. Somewhere to your right, a thud echoes across the water, a wooden post being secured, maybe, or someone shifting a basket of tools. It's a sound born of centuries of repetition. The night air carries a smoky hint from a nearby torch, and you inhale that earthy sweet scent that suggests someone's been tending a fire with driftwood. You rise once more, brushing sand from your palms. The lanterns beckon you onward, still guiding you around the pond's perimeter. Each step feels like an introduction, every detail a piece of a much larger story. Ahead, the stones rise higher and more deliberately structured. The walkway narrows. The air thickens with history you can almost taste. The night invites you deeper. You keep following the lanterns until the shoreline subtly shifts under your feet, the soft sand giving way to a firmer, carefully placed stretch of stone. The change is almost theatrical, as if the island itself is saying, "Okay, enough warm-up, time for the real tour." You step onto the broad curve of the Quapa, the great seawall that arcs around the pond like a half-moon hugging the ocean's edge. It rises only waist-high in most places, yet it feels monumental, a quiet giant built not to intimidate but to endure. You run your hand along its surface. The stones are smooth in some spots, jagged in others, each one positioned generations ago with the kind of precision that modern contractors would probably blame on delays due to supply chain issues. These walls weren't laid with mortar. They were held together by balance, weight, and centuries of expertise. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your thoughts. Many Hawaiian fishpond walls were constructed with basalt rock stacked so skillfully that they could withstand constant wave pressure without collapsing. Basically the oceanfront version of a tightrope act. The waves lap against the ocean-facing side of the Quapa, sending shivers of sound through the stone. You listen as the rocks absorb the impact, dispersing it through the curve of the wall, turning brute force into gentle vibration. It's like the seawall is exhaling each time a wave hits, refusing to be rattled. You wish your inbox handled stress this gracefully. You walk along the top of the wall, careful with your footing because the stones are uneven and your balance, let's be honest, is questionable at best. The moon's reflection glides across the pond beside you, shimmering like a silver fish. A breeze sweeps your hair back, making you feel dramatic, like you're in some historical documentary where soundtrack violins swell in the background. As you continue, you notice something unexpected. Pockets of tiny plants growing between the stones. Not weeds exactly, just hardy little tufts brave enough to make a home where land and sea constantly argue. Some old accounts mention that certain types of shoreline moss and algae on the Quapa were actually considered helpful indicators of pond health. If they showed up in the wrong place, pond keepers knew the water flow or salinity was off. Basically, ancient botanists were standing around squinting at algae like, "Him suspicious." You lean down for a closer look. The plants stare under your breath, trembling like they're sharing gossip about your posture. A crab you swear wasn't there 2 seconds ago pops out from between the stones, gives you a look that definitely translates to "watch your step," and disappears. Water sloshes against the stones below, the sound deepening as you reach a thicker, more imposing stretch of the wall. This is where the builders of the 19th century, and long before, reinforced the structure to withstand winter surf. Historians still argue whether certain ponds were engineered by specialized guilds of stone experts or by broader community labor guided by master builders. But everyone seems to agree that whoever placed these stones had hands steadier than yours while trying to carry a cup of tea across the room. You pause again, letting the night settle around you. The lanterns flicker behind you on the shoreline, but here on the Quapa, they feel distant, like small memories you've stepped away from. The moon becomes your main light source, washing the stones in cool silver. You take another slow step, feeling the texture of each rock through the soles of your modern shoes. The ocean on your right mutters darkly, churning in a rhythm that almost sounds judgmental. Meanwhile, the pond on your left remains calm, its surface so still it looks like a watercolor painting interrupted only by the occasional ripple from a curious fish. You marvel at the contrast, the wild sea and the disciplined pond, separated by mere feet of stone but existing in entirely different moods. You imagine the workers who built this wall centuries earlier. They would have hauled stones from quarries or shorelines, passing them hand to hand in long lines, placing each one with a sense of responsibility that modern group projects could only dream of. You picture a teenager in the 1800s sighing dramatically as he carries rocks, while an elder shakes their head at his attitude. Some things never change. As you continue along the arc, the wall subtly changes shape. It straightens in places, bulges outward in others, adjustments made to accommodate natural contours or changes in ocean behavior. You realize this isn't just a wall, it's a conversation between people and landscape, one that took place over generations. You step carefully, feeling the weight of that history under your feet, though thankfully not the weight of any toppling rocks. A gentle splash draws your attention. You peer down to see a school of small fish dart through the pond's edge, their tiny bodies shimmering like misplaced stars. They twist and turn in synchronized patterns, the kind of choreography you'd expect from a fish ballet troupe. You try to count them but lose track halfway through, partly because they are fast and partly because your mental math at this hour is questionable. Further down the wall, you encounter a wider platform of stones forming a sort of lookout point. You step onto it, the stones warming your soles. From here, the view broadens. The curving Quapa stretches on both sides, the ocean beyond rolls in slow breaths, and the pond glows under the moon like a giant obsidian bowl. The sight is serene enough to make you forget, momentarily, the suspicious crab incident earlier. You take a deep breath, inhaling sea air sharp enough to clear your sinuses and possibly your moral compass. A palm tree leans out over the shore behind you, its fronds whispering secrets you'll never quite catch. A night bird calls, a short, haunting note that echoes against the water. The air feels thick with possibility, like the island is waiting for you to notice something important. So you look again at the seawall. You see the craftsmanship, the symmetry, the sheer stubborn brilliance of building something meant to defy the ocean without fighting it. The Quapa doesn't try to conquer the sea. It works with it, channeling currents and tides in ways that keep the pond alive and abundant. You stand on the stones a little longer, letting the night breeze brush past you like a friend who shows up uninvited but brings snacks. Ahead, the lantern trail picks up again at the far end of the wall, leading into the next stretch of the pond's story. You take one last look at the stones beneath your feet, stones that have weathered storms, fed families, and held firm for centuries, and then you step forward. The wall guides you onward. You follow the curve of the quapa until the stones narrow into a natural funnel, guiding you toward the structure that feels like the true threshold of the pond. The air changes here, more motion, more sound, more intention. You step closer and find yourself standing before the makaha, the wooden sluice gate that breathes life into the entire system. If the pond were a great lung, this is where it inhales and exhales. The gate stands between ocean and pond, its slatted panels glistening with moisture. Moonlight catches on the wet wood, highlighting grooves worn smooth by decades of tide and touch. The lantern glow reflects in the water beneath the gate, making it look like there's a soft fire burning below the surface. You crouch instinctively, drawn by the current tugging through the narrow openings, gentle but persistent, like someone brushing past you in a crowd saying, "Excuse me, coming through." The first thing you notice is how the gate seems to hum with activity. Water rushes through the slats, carrying drifting bits of seaweed, the occasional tiny crab, and shimmering schools of pua, juvenile fish so small and fast they flick across your vision like living sparks. These tiny travelers slip easily into the pond, welcomed as future residents. Meanwhile, larger fish try to nose their way out, only to bump into the slats with a disappointed flick of their tails. You can't help but empathize. We've all been there, trying to squeeze through a doorway that was definitely not designed for our current snack-based lifestyle choices. A mainstream historical fact surfaces as you watch the water pulse inward. Makaha gates have existed in Hawaiian ponds for centuries and were built with angled wooden slats to control the exchange between fresh and salt water, ensuring optimal salinity and flow. These weren't simple barriers. They were biological managers, handling everything from fish sizes to nutrient cycles. You lean in, feeling the rhythmic push of water against your shins. The tide is rising, and with it, the music of the gate changes. More rush, deeper tone, a steady tempo. The wood creaks softly, like it's speaking the ocean's language. Workers nearby adjust a few stones around the foundation, checking for gaps and making sure the gate holds its perfect balance between restriction and freedom. A figure moves beside you, a pond keeper. They step with a kind of calm certainty that tells you this is their domain. They reach out to the wooden frame, pressing 2 fingers against the grain as though taking its pulse. You glance at their profile, trying to read their expression, but it's serene and focused, the look of someone who has watched many tides come and go and still finds each one personally interesting. As you straighten up, your foot nudges a small pile of discarded mollusk shells. They are smooth and pearly, catching the lantern light. Some 19th century pond keepers reportedly used crushed shells sprinkled near gate foundations to discourage certain burrowing critters from weakening the structure. Basically an early anti-critter security system, Hawaiian aquaculture had DLC before downloadable content existed. The pond keeper gives a brief nod toward the swirling water. You follow their gaze and see a cluster of amayama, mullet, hovering near the inner side of the gate, pretending they are not extremely interested in the outside world. They dart forward, test the slats, realize they are too big, and retreat with theatrical disappointment. You swear one of them gives you a look that says, "I know you saw that." Forget it immediately. The water's movement mesmerizes you, the endless flow in, the careful control, the dynamic tension between sea and pond. Historians still argue whether certain gate designs evolved independently on different islands or whether specialist carpenters traveled between districts, refining the craft over generations. Either way, the result is in front of you now, a structure that is both functional and oddly poetic. You move a little closer to the ocean side of the gate. The surf rolls in, pushing water through the slats with purpose. The sound deepens, becomes more insistent, and suddenly your face is misted by a salty spray. You blink, sputter, and quickly try to pretend you meant to do that. A passing worker notices, smiles faintly, and turns back to adjusting a rope. At least someone's amused. You watch as another pond keeper kneels beside the gate, scooping a handful of sand from the shallow edge. They sift it, letting grains slip through their fingers. Maybe they are checking sediment levels or simply feeling the texture. People who work with water often read clues others would completely miss. You wonder how many generations have stood exactly where you stand now, learning the same lessons, listening to the same sounds. The tide reaches a turning point. You feel the shift before you recognize it. Less pull, more pressure. The pond breathes out. The current eases. A few intrepid fish dart in with the last of the push before the ocean begins its slow retreat. The wooden slats creak again, settling into their new rhythm. You dip your fingers into the water and let it run over your skin. It's cooler now, charged with ocean energy. You imagine the countless times people must have tested this very spot. Elders teaching Kiki how to read tides. Families checking for the right moment to release fry. Skilled fishermen tuning their senses to the smallest changes in flow. This gate has been witness to centuries of decisions, chores, and quiet rituals. You stand and drift a little to the side where the lanterns glow brightest. A group of workers is preparing a woven trap near the gate, something like a funnel of netting meant to guide fish during harvest times. You watch them work, nimble fingers looping fibers, knots tied with precision, hands moving in a rhythm that's almost meditative. The soft slap of water against the stones accompanies their movements like a drumbeat. A stray breeze picks up, sending the scent of seaweed curling around you. It's earthy, salty, a bit funky, and absolutely at home here. You inhale deeply, though a small part of you wonders if the crab from earlier is somehow responsible for this specific aroma. The thought makes you smile. You take a few steps back and observe the whole scene again, the pond glowing dark and deep, the ocean tossing itself against the outer stones, the makaha standing firm between them, accepting chaos on one side and cultivating calm on the other. It's a gate, yes, but also a negotiator, a diplomat, a guardian with wooden ribs and watery lungs. The tide shifts again, subtle but unmistakable. The pond's pulse steadies. The moon climbs higher, spreading its pale glow across the gate. You turn your steps toward the next stretch of the shore, following the lanterns as they curve gently away from the makaha. Behind you, the gate continues its eternal work. Ahead of you, the night deepens. You follow the lantern-lit path as it curves away from the makaha, leaving behind the steady rush of tidal breath. The sound fades slowly, replaced by quieter shore noises, rustling palms, distant surf, the low thrum of nighttime insects who all seem to be auditioning for first chair in the nocturnal orchestra. The ground beneath your feet shifts from stone to packed earth, warm from the day's sun and soft enough to make your footsteps sink just a little. The trail leads you toward a small rise overlooking the pond, and as you crest it, you find them, the ali'i stewards, chiefly leaders, moving like silhouettes carved from moonlight. They are not sitting on grand thrones or wearing elaborate regalia tonight. Instead, they stand shoulder to shoulder with the pond keepers, their presence unmistakable yet quiet. You can tell who they are by the way the group subtly orients itself around them, like iron filings responding to a magnet. Their posture carries the soft weight of responsibility, centuries old, deeply rooted, impossible to ignore. A cluster of workers approaches the ali'i leader with baskets, some woven from lauhala, others shaped with sturdy vines. Inside them lie simple tools, wooden scrapers, bundles of tea leaves, and a few stone weights. The ali'i examines each object briefly, nodding with the calm satisfaction of someone who understands both the big picture and the small details. You watch as they confer with the steward, pointing toward the far section of the quapa, discussing repairs that need tending before the next strong swell. A mainstream historical fact stirs in your mind. Hawaiian alii didn't simply rule from afar. They directly oversaw resource management, especially fish ponds, which were crucial economic and cultural assets. Their role included ensuring labor was organized, harvests were fairly distributed, and the delicate balance of the pond was protected. You imagine a modern politician trying to monitor fish salinity by hand. Easy to picture, yes, but probably ending in several lawsuits and a soggy press conference. The alii turns, and for a moment you think they're looking right at you. Their expression is calm, so calm, in fact, that you start questioning whether your posture is somehow disrespectful. You straighten up just in case, though your spine cracks loudly enough to attract curious glances from nearby workers. You smile weakly, pretending you totally meant for that to happen. As the alii moves along the pond's edge, others follow, advisors, extended family members, and skilled attendants who carry small bundles wrapped in kapa cloth. One attendant kneels near the water and unwraps a folded cloth to reveal a polished stone. She lowers it gently into the pond, murmuring something under her breath. You can't hear the words, but you feel their intention, a gesture acknowledging the pond's life, its gifts, and its needs. A pond keeper nearby leans toward another and whispers something you can't hear, but they both glance at you afterward with curious amusement. Maybe they've noticed you trying to blend in with all the subtlety of a neon tourist shout. You run a hand through your hair, trying to look natural, which almost never works when you're actively thinking about looking natural. The alii walk toward a group gathered around a small wooden platform. On it lies a cluster of dried pandanus leaves, coils of cordage, and a rolled mat. A steward begins speaking with calm authority. From the tone and gestures, you gather they are reviewing plans for tomorrow's maintenance work, reinforcing the outer curve of the wall, checking the gate's alignment, redistributing sand, and possibly relocating a few plants that are getting too ambitious for the structural integrity of the stones. Historians still argue whether alii directly participated in manual labor or primarily directed it, but many accounts suggest they often worked alongside the community during large-scale projects. Watching the scene in front of you, it's clear the roles aren't rigid. The chief isn't above the work, they simply guide it. And the people aren't obedient out of fear, they are aligned by shared stewardship. The whole scene has this smooth, interlaced coordination, like a paddling crew gliding across calm water. The pond keepers continue discussing the week's tasks. One of them gestures toward a distant part of the quapa, where moonlit spray jumps over the stones. Their face tightens, something about that section needs attention. The alii listens intently, nods once, and then turns to address the larger group. Their voice carries across the pond, steady and warm, like the surface of deep water. Even though you don't understand every word, the tone tells you everything: gratitude, direction, encouragement. A nearby worker rolls their shoulders, mutters something about needing extra hands tomorrow, and the alii responds with a soft smile, saying, judging by the laughter that follows, something a little teasing. You realize leadership here isn't distant. It's relational, grounded, almost familial. You wonder what it would feel like if modern bosses used gentle humor instead of poorly timed motivational posters. The meeting continues. Workers kneel, sketching diagrams in the dirt with sticks, outlining drainage patterns, noting sections of the wall where stones need replacing. You notice the alii crouches beside them, tracing their own finger along the diagram, adjusting a curve, adding a small mark. It's a collaborative choreography. You wander slightly closer to the pond. The moonlight reflects off the surface, revealing the faint shadows of fish drifting beneath. Maybe awa, maybe amayama, maybe both. Nosy roommates with no sense of personal space. You imagine the alii watching these same fish earlier in the day, gauging the pond's productivity, calculating how much could be harvested, how much needed to remain. Resource management wasn't a suggestion here. It was the spine of the entire food system. You overhear two attendants discussing schedules, who's gathering materials for wall repair, who's preparing medicinal plants for someone with an aching back, probably from lifting rocks all week, and who's taking inventory of baskets used in last moon's harvest. Every detail seems to matter. You're starting to think these people invented project management centuries before software charts and annoying reminder emails. Nearby, a faint laugh ripples through the group as someone tells a joke, likely one at the expense of a younger worker who apparently misread tide timing earlier. You grin, because even in the 19th century, someone's always messing up the schedule. The alii eventually steps away from the group, walking calmly toward the water. They stand with their hands clasped behind their back, gazing over the pond's surface as though reading something in its reflection. You notice how still they stand, how patient. It strikes you that leadership here doesn't rush. It waits, observes, and then moves with purpose. A light breeze pushes across the pond, carrying the scent of limu and warm earth. You breathe it in. It feels like the island itself exhaling. You take another step toward the alii, but stop a respectful distance away. Their eyes track the horizon, alert yet peaceful. The lanterns flicker behind you. Workers begin packing up their tools, rolling mats, gathering baskets. The night is settling deeper, stretching comfortably across the land. You take one last look at the alii, silhouetted against moonlit water, steady, grounded, part of the pond's heartbeat. Then you turn toward the next path. You step away from the quiet authority of the alii and into a softer rhythm of movement, one that feels less ceremonial and more like slipping into the steady heartbeat of everyday life. The lantern path narrows here, winding along the inner edge of the pond where grasses brush your ankles and the soil feels springy underfoot. You can hear gentle splashes in the distance, the kind made by someone who very clearly knows where each submerged rock is. You, meanwhile, are relying on hope and the vague memory of your tetanus shot schedule. The workers ahead move with an easy familiarity, each one engaged in a daily pond chore that looks deceptively simple, as all things do right before you try them yourself. One person is bent over the water's edge, scooping away algae that's grown too thick along the stones. Another uses a wooden scraper to clear debris that's caught between rocks. A third is checking a woven basket trap tied to a shallow area, its frame glistening with moonlit droplets. You join them in spirit, though you maintain a very safe distance from anything sharp, slimy, or capable of pinching. The nearest worker pauses mid-scrape to glance up at you with a faint smile, a knowing one, the kind that says, "Ah, another curious wanderer drawn in by the pond's charm. Let's see how long before they step in something questionable." You return the smile, which hopefully reads as, "Please don't hand me anything dangerous." A mainstream historical fact drifts to mind as you watch them work. Tending a Hawaiian fish pond wasn't a once-a-week chore. It required constant maintenance, daily, even hourly, because water flow, salinity, and sediment shifted with every tide. In the 19th century, entire families were involved in these routines, each person taking on tasks that fit their strengths, ages, and knowledge. One worker motions you toward a flatter section of the shoreline. You follow, careful not to trip over the raised roots of a nearby hollow tree. The worker kneels and points to a thin line of dark sediment collecting where the pond's gentle current meets a cluster of stones. You watch as they sweep it away with a branch broom, clearing the gap to ensure proper water movement. It's not glamorous, but it's oddly satisfying, like tidying a kitchen counter, except the counter is alive and occasionally spits fish at you. Nearby, someone is braiding new cordage for a net, their fingers dancing through the fibers with an almost hypnotic rhythm. The strands twist and tighten into a strong, flexible line. They glance up just once, then go right back to their work with the kind of concentration normally reserved for bomb defusal or assembling flat pack furniture. Some pond keepers historically used bundles of certain plants, like tea leaves bound together, to diagnose water conditions. If the bundle drifted or settled in particular ways, it signaled changes in flow or salinity. Basically early water sensors, but biodegradable, aesthetically pleasing, and unlikely to require a firmware update. As you watch the workers move, their tasks begin to form an invisible web of interlocking responsibilities. One person clears debris, another checks the gate, a third tends to the banks, pulling out invasive plants that could weaken the stones. Someone else wades waist-deep into a still cove, scattering handfuls of crushed seaweed to feed the pond's algae, food for the herbivorous fish raised within. Historians still argue whether specialized roles within pond maintenance were strictly assigned or fluidly shared, but looking at this scene, you get the sense that flexibility was the real skill. Everyone seems to know what needs doing, and more importantly, when to shift gears. You envy this in a small, modern way. Your own ability to shift gears usually involves caffeine, panic, or a well-timed nap. The moon glows brighter as you continue your quiet stroll. Every few feet reveals a new little vignette of pond life, a worker adjusting a stake that keeps part of the bank in place, a pair transporting a heavy basket of stones to reinforce an eroded section, a child, maybe 12, carefully pulling dead leaves from the water with a tool taller than they are. You sidle closer to the child because, well, you want to know if pond chores were really assigned to kids this young. They catch your eye and grin, lifting the tool like a proud trophy. You grin back, silently awarding them Employee of the Month. Undisputed, considering their dedication and the fact that you've contributed approximately 0 calories of effort so far. At one particularly lively bend, a group works together to tighten a long rope stretched between 2 anchored stakes. When the rope stiffens, they use it as a gentle barrier to guide fish toward a deeper section where conditions are better tonight. It's subtle, almost invisible under the moonlight, but incredibly clever. You step closer to the pond's edge, half curious and half trying not to slip. The surface is glassy here. You peer into the depths and see fish, small at first, then larger shapes further in, gliding through dark water. Each flick of their fins stirs tiny eddies that ripple outward in delicate concentric circles. The pond seems both peaceful and industrious at once. Everywhere you look, something is happening. Someone checks a trap, someone rinses mud from a tool, someone hauls a bundle of reeds. It's like watching a living machine with dozens of interdependent gears, all moving silently, smoothly. A worker motions toward you, gesturing at the bank. You approach, and they point to a new growth of grass pushing up between 2 critical stones. They say something soft that you can't quite interpret, but you catch the meaning anyway. This plant doesn't belong here. It threatens the subtle geometry holding the wall together. You nod gravely, as though you've always been passionate about stone integrity, and watch as they gently uproot the invader, shake soil from its roots, and toss it aside with surgical precision. Another worker, several feet away, laughs loudly as a fish splashes water directly onto their face. They wipe it off, mutter something that is almost certainly the 19th century equivalent of rude, and then continue as though this happens every day. It probably does. You take a moment to sit on a flat stone near the bank. The air hums with quiet activity. The pond keepers move with the steady patience of people who understand that any shortcut today becomes a much bigger problem tomorrow. This is maintenance as meditation, slow, deliberate, deeply connected to the land. A soft wind brushes past, carrying the scent of wet sedge and distant salt spray. You watch the lanterns flicker along the wall and feel your breath sinking with the pond's rhythm. For a moment, everything seems perfectly balanced. The workers, the water, the stones, even your own restless thoughts. A frog croaks nearby, startling you enough that you nearly launch yourself into the pond. A passing worker chuckles. You pretend nothing happened. Gracefully, as one does. The chores continue around you, spiraling outward into the night. Quiet, necessary, ancient. And the lantern path invites you onward once again. You follow the lantern path until it thins into a soft river of gold along the pond's edge, flickering like the breath of a sleeping giant. The workers who tended the daily chores earlier have shifted into a different mode now. More focused, more synchronized, more attuned to the soft pulse of the night. Harvest night. You feel the change before you fully see it, as though the pond itself has inhaled and is holding that breath, waiting. A group gathers ahead on a slightly raised bank, their silhouettes etched against the mirror-dark water. Nets lie coiled at their feet, glistening like silver threads in the lantern light. You approach slowly, as though stepping into a dream that's already half underway. The air is damp and cool, tinged with the earthy scent of wet wood and the faint sweetness of crushed limu. Someone murmurs a chant, just a few soft notes, and the sound ripples across the water like a thin veil of sound settling over the pond. One pond keeper gestures for a few others to push a canoe, small, narrow, built low for quiet movement, into the water. Two climb in with practiced ease, paddles dipping silently beneath the surface. The canoe glides forward like a shadow with a purpose. You watch, feeling a little jealous of how smoothly it moves. Your own last attempt at paddling probably looked like a confused beetle trapped on a treadmill. A mainstream historical fact floats into your mind. Fish pond harvests were often timed with the lunar cycle, especially during the full moon or certain rising tides when fish were more likely to move toward the makaha or gather in predictable clusters. The moon serves as tonight's silent conductor, and it hangs low and wide above you, bright enough to etch silver edges around everything it touches. The workers on the shore unwind a long net, wide, weighted, sturdy. Two groups carry opposite ends of it as they step into the water. They move slowly, carefully placing each foot as though the pond is listening. You follow at a respectful distance along the bank, your toes sinking into the cool mud. The net unrolls in a perfect arc, guided by hands that know its weight as intimately as family. The canoe glides into position, the paddlers making tiny adjustments with flicks of their wrists. When the time is right, one worker on shore calls out softly. The canoe crew responds with a nod and begins lowering a second net, letting its weighted edges sink in a graceful, descending curve. It settles like a curtain underwater, shimmering faintly in the moonlight whenever the surface ripples. You can feel the tension building, not the stressful kind, but the anticipatory kind, like waiting for a firework that makes no noise but fills the sky nonetheless. Some accounts mention that certain families believed whistling during a harvest invited mischievous spirits, or, at the very least, annoyed the fish enough to scatter. So no one whistles tonight. Instead, there's a hushed reverence, punctuated only by soft water sounds and the faint creak of rope. The workers begin gently drawing the net closer, tightening its arc, slowly nudging fish toward the deeper cove where the second net waits like a patient trap. It's not frantic or forceful, it's coaxing, guiding, cooperative. The pond has provided, and the people respond with care. You notice a school of ama shimmering beneath the surface, flashes of silver weaving like threads through dark silk. They move as one organism, swirling, regrouping, drifting toward the narrowing space. You're struck by how beautiful it looks, like the pond has turned into a giant bowl of stars swirling under the moon. The canoe crew lifts their net slightly, creating just enough movement to discourage escape but not enough to cause panic. This is strategy, choreography, generational skill made visible in a single sweep of arms and water. Historians still argue whether certain chant patterns during harvest nights influenced fish behavior or simply helped synchronize worker movements. Whatever the case, tonight, a soft chant hums again. Gentle, rhythmic, almost like the workers are reminding the pond that this is a partnership. You can't translate the words, but you feel them working on you too, loosening that knot between your shoulders you didn't know you were carrying. Someone steps near you and nearly startles you into announcing your presence with the world's least majestic squeak. They carry a woven basket, sturdy and deep, designed for scooping fish without damaging scales. You watch as they wade into the shallow water, positioning themselves where the two nets begin to converge. Their stance is steady, patient. Yours is mostly just trying to avoid slipping and face-planting into wet mud. The nets draw closer. The silver movement intensifies. Water shimmers with a growing density of life. And in one mesmerizing moment, the workers lift the inner edge of the net, a soft sweep upward, fluid and silent. Fish surge into the waiting baskets, tails flicking, bodies glinting in the lantern light. You hold your breath, feeling the quiet thrill ripple through the group. It's not a cheer or sudden burst of celebration. It's the kind of warm, satisfied exhale shared after completing something both necessary and sacred. Food for the community. Balance maintained. The pond still healthy. The baskets fill quickly. Workers carry them to a flat rock at the shore where others wait to sort the fish. Each movement is purposeful, separating mature fish for immediate use, returning juveniles to the pond, making sure nothing is wasted. You watch someone gently drop a small fish back into the water with the tenderness of placing a baby into a cradle. It flicks its tail in a tiny splash of gratitude. Well, probably confusion, but gratitude sounds nicer. The night deepens. More nets are cast. More fish are gathered. The rhythm repeats. Lift, sweep, sort, return. You find yourself swaying slightly with the motions, lulled by the cadence of the water and the soft murmurs of the workers. There's a serenity here, wrapped in the physical labor. At one point, a larger fish leaps unexpectedly near your foot, splashing your calf in a rude but refreshing gesture. A nearby worker snorts. You shrug, pretending this is exactly what you hoped would happen. Fish puddle spa treatment, very exclusive. A final pass of the net gathers the last silver flashes for tonight. The canoe glides back to shore, its hull whispering against the stones. The workers pull their nets in, coil them neatly, and check for tears. The lanterns sway in the breeze, casting longer shadows now, softer, more tired. The harvest is complete. And as the pond settles into its post-harvest calm, you follow the lanterns once more, the smell of wet nets clinging faintly to the air behind you. You follow the workers away from the water's edge, your steps sinking softly into the damp shoreline, and soon you find yourself drifting toward a quieter gathering spot where the freshly caught fish glisten atop woven mats. Lanterns sway overhead, warm and honey-colored, brushing gold over scales that look like spilled starlight. The night air hums with gentle conversation, the satisfied murmur that floats between people who know they've done something meaningful. You settle nearby, close enough to smell the ocean still clinging to the harvest. The fish, ameama, awa, and a few flashy little stragglers whose names you absolutely cannot pronounce on the first try, lie arranged in thoughtful rows. It's not disorganization, it's the beginning of purpose. Your host motions you closer with that same easygoing casualness that makes you wonder if they've noticed how often you nearly slip on wet mud. You crouch down beside them, and they begin to sort the catch with deliberate, practiced motions. Some fish are placed into baskets lined with tea leaves, ready for chiefs or honored families. Others will be shared widely among the community. A few will be eaten right away, turned into meals that smell like comfort and memory. You're invited to pick one up, gently, and feel the smooth firmness of the ameama. It's cool, fresh, almost pulsing with the pond's own life. The workers talk softly about how important this species once was. And that sparks the mainstream historical fact for this section. Ama mullets, were among the most commonly raised fish in Hawaiian fish ponds, celebrated for their adaptability, their clean taste, and the way they fed on limu and plankton that naturally thrived in the pond ecosystem. You're handed an awa, the milkfish, whose translucent fins ripple like a thin veil in the lantern glow. The worker explains how prized this species was, not just because it tasted amazing, but because its behavior in the pond revealed subtle clues about the water's health. If the awa looked dull or sluggish, something in the environment was off. Fish as water quality test kits, nature really does run its own diagnostics. While you admire the catch, someone nearby begins prepping a small cooking fire. The wood crackles beneath the night, sending up little sparks that dance like tiny fire spirits. Someone jokes that the sparks are just mosquitoes with ambition. That earns a tired chuckle from the group. You add a laugh too, because at this point you're fully committed to blending in, even if you're one damp stumble away from ruining the ambience. Some elders used to say that ama could recognize gossip. If you talked badly about someone while handling the fish, the next harvest would mysteriously shrink. Is it superstition? Psychological reinforcement for community harmony? A fish-based gossip filter? Hard to say, but the way the workers mention it makes you smile. Even the fish pond had its own version of social media, low-tech, high judgment. You smell the first hints of roasting fish as the fire warms. A few workers sprinkle crushed sea salt and wrap delicate cuts in tea leaves to steam them. The leaves puff slightly as they heat, releasing a grassy sweetness that blends with the salty night air. You take a deep breath and feel your shoulders loosen. No gourmet restaurant has ever matched the aroma of this moment, even the fancy ones that charge you for the ambience of ocean vibes. Someone hands you a small piece of cooked awa to try. It's tender, flaky, subtly sweet. You can taste the pond in it, not in a muddy way, but in that deep mineral richness that whispers of brackish water, tides, and long expanses of sunlight. You chew slowly, wanting to savor every second. Historians still argue whether certain fish preparation techniques seen today, like specific fermentation methods or complex seasoning styles, originated entirely from pre-contact traditions or evolved alongside foreign ingredients introduced in the 19th century. Tonight, though, no one seems particularly concerned about academic disputes. Your only debate is whether you should ask for seconds without looking greedy. The workers continue sorting the remaining fish, gently placing the juveniles back into buckets filled with cool pond water. You watch as someone carries them to the pond's edge and releases them. The tiny bodies dart away like whispers escaping into the dark. There's something deeply soothing about it. This cycle of taking only what's needed and returning what must grow. As the night deepens, the conversation turns to how these fish once shaped not just meals, but the entire rhythm of life. Festivals, ceremonies, and family gatherings often centered around food from the fish pond. Chiefs relied on steady pond harvests to support visitors, warriors, and political alliances. A reliable source of ama could mean the difference between hosting with abundance or scrambling for resources. You imagine a 19th century luau built around tonight's harvest, torches blazing, drums echoing across the landscape, platters of steamed fish laid out next to taro, sweet potato, and freshly pounded poi. The scene feels alive in your mind, as vibrant as the lantern-lit moment around you now. Someone beside you adds another layer of meaning. These fish also shaped stories and memories. Children learn to respect the ponds by watching how elders handled the fish. Families pass down taste traditions. Grandparents teaching grandchildren how to detect when the ama had the perfect texture or when the awa needed just one more sprinkle of salt. A moment later, someone asks if you've ever seen a fish pond feast where the fish were carved so beautifully they looked like living sculptures. You shake your head, and they describe it vividly. cutting delicate patterns into the skin, almost like tattoos. Art and sustenance intertwined. A gust of wind sweeps across the pond, rustling palm fronds overhead. The fire dims and then steadies. You pull your cloth wrap a little tighter around your shoulders, though the air is still warm enough to feel comfortable. A worker offers you a cup of warm broth made from the fish heads, seasoned with herbs you can't name but definitely appreciate. It slips down your throat like liquid calm. You listen more than you speak now. You hear how the fish ponds weren't just sources of food, they were living calendars. People could predict seasons based on fish behavior, water temperature, or even the color of certain algae. The ponds were teachers as much as providers. And as the night wears on, you begin to feel that subtle shift again, the one that tells you it's time to move on, time to continue the journey. The workers stand, stretch, and begin cleaning the mats and tools. You rise too, swaying slightly because your legs forgot they were sitting for so long. The fire softens to embers. The pond glitters quietly, almost as if smiling after a good meal. You take one last look at the golden rows of fish, at the hands that tended them, at the night that wrapped everything in a soft, silver hush. Then you step back onto the path, ready to follow the story forward. You continue along the path, the soft glow of lanterns thinning until only moonlight guides your steps. The pond settles behind you, but the echo of the harvest, nets lifting, water whispering, workers murmuring, stays wrapped around your thoughts like a warm shawl. You wander toward a quieter corner of the shoreline, where the air feels more delicate, as though it's been filtered through calm hands. There, you notice a group of women gathered under a broad hollow tree, its long leaves trailing like green ribbons. They move with a different rhythm than the earlier bustle, unhurried, gentle, yet somehow more precise, like the steady pulse of something ancient and essential. You approach quietly, almost tiptoeing, because the scene feels like stepping into a softer frequency of time. They are tending baskets, scrubbing mats, gathering fresh limu in bundles that smell crisp and briny. One woman catches your eye and waves you closer with a smile that's both amused and kind. Amused, perhaps, because you look like someone who still forgets their left foot from their right in deep mud. You sit near them on a woven mat, trying not to fall through its squares like a toddler encountering gravity for the first time. The women talk in soft voices, hands moving without hesitation. They sort algae into neat piles, some for fish feed, some for medicines, some for flavors, and some simply for the satisfaction of knowing each strand is where it belongs. One explains, with that friendly patience usually reserved for training small goats, that limu varieties were essential to pond health. Some species added nutrients, others indicated water quality, and a few even discouraged unwanted pests. Then comes the mainstream historical fact of this section. In many traditional Hawaiian communities, women played key roles in managing the pond ecology, particularly in gathering limu, monitoring water conditions, and teaching younger generations how to recognize subtle signs of imbalance long before a problem grew large. Their knowledge wasn't secondary, it was foundational. You watch as one woman picks up a delicate strand of limu and holds it to the moonlight, turning it between her fingers like she's examining a precious necklace. "Too pale," she murmurs. "Too thin." Another woman nods knowingly, comparing it to her own bundle. They discuss the recent tides, rainfall, and what the shimmering sheen on the water earlier might have meant. You realize quickly that these women aren't just discussing plants, they're reading the pond like a living manuscript. One reaches out and offers you a handful of limu to smell. You lean in, expecting something like soggy lettuce. Instead, it smells vibrant and clean, like a mix of sea breeze and fresh rain on stone. She laughs softly, telling you that certain limu varieties were once considered delicacies, served only during special gatherings. You make a mental note. If limu ever becomes haute cuisine at a trendy restaurant, these women deserve royalties. As they work, they share small stories, how their mothers taught them to identify limu by feel alone, how their grandmothers whispered pond secrets during long walks at dawn, and how as children they would test their knowledge in playful competitions. One woman chuckles, confessing she once mixed up two nearly identical species and fed the wrong one to the fish. They were offended, she says dramatically, and the group erupts in soft laughter. You join in, pretending you understand the nuances of fish outrage. And just when the moment feels comfortably grounded, one of the women tells you that some families believed limu could remember your mood. If you gathered it while angry, it wilted faster. If you gathered it with kindness, it stayed vibrant for days. You can't help but picture yourself smiling at a piece of seaweed like an overly enthusiastic plant parent. The woman shrugs, amused. Maybe it's true, she says, or maybe it just keeps us behaving. You watch as a younger girl joins the group, carrying a basket she almost drops twice on the way. She's eager, curious, and equally determined to prove she can carry more algae than any reasonable human should. The women guide her hands, correcting her grip, teaching her to differentiate textures without scolding. They laugh gently with her when she splashes herself while rinsing a bundle. You smile because she reminds you of yourself, enthusiastic, clumsy, hoping no one notices the ratio of effort to grace. The girl shows you a thick cluster of red limu she collected. The women nod approvingly. It's a good batch, they say. Full, fresh, and perfect for flavoring certain dishes. They explain how some limu added tang, some added crunch, and some added vitamins long before anyone used the word nutrient. You ask whether the fish have flavor preferences too, and the women exchange glances before one finally answers with a sly grin. The fish like whatever keeps them alive. Not that different from us. Historians still argue whether women held formal roles in pond governance or whether their influence came through more subtle, inherited responsibilities that were widely understood but not often written down. As you listen to their discussions about tides, moon cycles, fish behavior, and algae patterns, you realize how flimsy those academic debates feel from this vantage point. The knowledge here is lived, woven into hands, voices, instincts, and memory. One of the women stands and invites you to follow her to the pond's edge. She shows you how to read the faint rings on the water, signs of tiny creatures surfacing. She lifts a small stone and points out how its underside hosts minuscule worlds of limu, mollusks, and insects. She explains how these microscopic clues help determine the timing of certain pond tasks. You nod along, impressed, even though your brain is quickly filling with more information than it can funnel into long-term storage. She gestures toward the pond itself and tells you how women often knew when storms were approaching based on the behavior of certain algae. Limu speaks before the clouds, she says. You just have to listen. You try listening. The pond remains politely silent. But you appreciate the sentiment. You walk with them as they gather tools, rinse baskets in the water, and prepare to return home for the night. Their laughter drifts behind you like a soft string of bells. You think about how much of the pond's harmony depends on these quiet, consistent acts, tending, observing, adjusting, teaching. You follow them back toward the path, feeling the shift in the air again, that subtle whisper telling you it's time to move deeper into the story. The pond glimmers at your back. The hollow leaves rustle. The moonlight trails across the water like silk unspooling. And somewhere in your mind, you store the lesson these women offered without ever stating outright. Ecosystems don't thrive because of grand gestures. They thrive because of careful hands, attentive eyes, and traditions carried in soft, steady voices. You continue along the moon-kissed path, the soft hush of the women's laughter still echoing behind you like a fading melody. The night feels wider now, open, spacious, ready to hold the next layer of story. Ahead, You notice movement along the pond's inner bank. Smaller silhouettes this time, quick and a little chaotic, like a flock of half-coordinated birds that never fully agreed on a plan. Kiki, children, cluster around a tall, patient elder who stands with a long stick in hand, tapping the water rhythmically. You drift closer, already amused, because the children's energy buzzes so brightly it practically lights the shoreline. You settle onto a rock a short distance away, trying not to interrupt what looks like a nighttime lesson disguised as fun. The elder taps the water again. The ripples spread out, soft waves glimmering beneath the moon, and the children mimic the movement enthusiastically. Except, of course, two kids who are locked in a silent competition over whose stick is the most impressive. You watch them lift their sticks like tiny warrior chiefs about to challenge destiny. The elder tolerates this with the long-suffering amusement of someone who has definitely seen this dynamic every single night for the last 30 years. One child notices you and waves, nearly knocking another child into the pond in the process. You wave back politely, as though you absolutely meant to be part of this lively class. The elder chuckles and beckons you closer. You stand, dust imaginary sand off your clothes to look prepared, and approach with the cautious optimism of someone who hopes no one asks them to demonstrate anything requiring coordination. The elder explains that tonight's lesson is about reading water patterns, how fish move, how currents shift, how even a slight change in the ripples can tell you something important. The kids nod earnestly, some with the wide-eyed focus of miniature scholars, others with the vaguely distracted look of someone mentally planning a midnight snack raid. And here comes the mainstream historical fact of this section. In many traditional Hawaiian communities, children learned fish pond knowledge from an early age through hands-on apprenticeship. They observed elders, practiced techniques, and gradually absorbed ecological understanding that no book could teach: how to sense salinity changes, how to read fish behavior, how to recognize when a pond was happy, as one elder puts it. You watch the elder dip their hand into the water and lift it slowly, letting beads of brackish water fall from their fingers. They tell the kiki to listen, not with their ears, but with their eyes. The kids scrunch their faces thoughtfully, as though trying to flex a sensory muscle they didn't know existed. You attempt to do the same, but mostly you just look like you're solving a very contemplative Sudoku puzzle. One child points excitedly at a faint ring spreading across the water's surface. The elder nods. "A fish just kissed the air," they say, which is possibly the most adorable scientific observation you've ever heard. The kids whisper the phrase to themselves, delighted. You whisper it too, because honestly, it's delightful. A moment later, a splash erupts near the edge, sending droplets onto your legs. A small fish darts away. The kids squeal. You pretend you totally expected that. The elder shakes their head with a smile and tells the children that fish always teach best when you're paying attention, and sometimes when you're not. The elder explains that some families used to give fish nicknames based on their habits. A particularly bold mullet that jumped higher than the others might be called Lele Nui, big jumper. A mischievous one that kept sneaking toward the sluice gate might be affectionately referred to as Kukiki Holo, the runaway kid. The children laugh and immediately begin assigning names to every fish ripple they see, creating an entire underwater soap opera unfolding in real time. You sit with them as the elder shifts the lesson to identifying pond creatures by sound. The children lean in. You lean in too. The elder taps the surface gently and everyone listens. Soft clicking from tiny crustaceans, faint slurping from algae-eating snails, the almost metallic whisper of water brushing the gate stones. You close your eyes briefly, surprised to realize the pond is never silent. It just speaks in a language most people forget to hear. But learning isn't all quiet observation. The elder hands each child a small scoop net and tells them to practice catching bits of floating limu. Not fish, just algae. Safe, calm, and perfect for building coordination. The children scatter with joyful shrieks that absolutely obliterate the peaceful night ambience from 30 seconds ago. You back away slightly, mostly to avoid becoming collateral splash damage. A girl near you concentrates so hard on her scoop technique that her tongue sticks out in earnest determination. She dips, lifts, dips again. Finally, she scoops a sizable clump and holds it aloft like a victorious hero. You applaud softly. She beams as though you just awarded her a diploma. Historians still argue whether Kiki training within fish ponds followed formalized curriculum, structured apprenticeships, or whether it relied more on intuitive, everyday exposure. Watching this scene unfold, the answer feels obvious. It's both. Learning happens in the quiet moments and the chaotic ones, in whispered knowledge and in loud splashes, in repetition, mistakes, and shared laughter. The elder then asks the children to practice walking along the bank while maintaining balance, an important skill when working near water. You're invited to try too. You accept, partly out of politeness, partly because your inner child is already awake and ready. Unfortunately, your adult center of gravity has other opinions. The kids move like confident little goats. You move like someone negotiating a wobbly surfboard made of jelly. You do manage a few steady steps, earning polite nods from the children. One even gives you a thumbs up, which feels like receiving a medal from a jury of tiny experts. As the lesson winds down, the elder gathers the children for one final exercise, gratitude. They form a small circle, hands held, and offer thanks to the pond for teaching them, feeding them, and allowing them to be part of its life. The moment is quiet, sincere. You feel a lump in your throat you pretend is just a very emotional mosquito. The children disperse soon after, running across the path like streaks of moonlit energy, heading toward their families. The elder stays behind for a moment, gazing at the water as though reading its surface like a story they've known since childhood. They turn to you, offering a smile that holds both warmth and a gentle challenge. Remember, they say, the pond teaches those who show up to learn. You nod, feeling the truth of it settle into your bones. You take one last look at the water, now smooth and soft under the night, then follow the path onward, ready for what comes next. You continue along the pond's winding path, still warmed by the Kiki's laughter that buzzes faintly in the back of your mind like a gentle tide refusing to fade. The night has deepened now, settling into that soft, velvety stillness where sound seems to travel farther, and every spark of lantern light feels like a tiny star pretending to be useful. You wander toward a broader clearing where the shoreline bends inward, forming a natural gathering space. There, you find people assembling around woven baskets stacked in tidy rows, each filled with the evening's carefully sorted catch. The fish gleam beneath the lantern glow, some silver, some pale blue, others reflecting hints of rose or gold as though they are carrying pieces of sunset inside their scales. Nearby, bundles of salt, rolled mats, coils of rope, and carved wooden markers lie waiting. A subtle hum of anticipation ripples through the air. You've stepped right into the heartbeat of inter-island exchange. A tall woman with sturdy shoulders lifts a basket effortlessly and sets it beside a double-hulled canoe resting in the shallows. She notices you watching and gives a small tilt of her head, the sort of nod people give when they recognize a curious observer who tries to blend in but mostly resembles a confused decorative shrub. She gestures for you to approach, and you do, stepping carefully around the bundles, doing your best not to trip over anything symbolic or important. She explains that tonight's catch isn't just for local meals. Some of it is destined to travel across the water, to neighboring communities on other parts of the island, and sometimes even beyond. Fish ponds fed more than the people who built them, she says. They fed relationships. Her words land gently, carrying the weight of something both logistical and deeply emotional. And here comes the mainstream historical fact for this section. Fish ponds played a vital role in inter-island trade networks during the 18th and 19th centuries. Their consistent, predictable yields allowed communities to exchange fish for goods like feathers, kapa cloth, canoe materials, medicinal plants, and even specialized tools. Abundance created generosity, and generosity created connection. You follow the woman as she checks each basket with a discerning eye, adjusting leaves, ensuring the fish are properly arranged for transport. She dips her fingers in a calabash bowl filled with brackish water and sprinkles droplets over the fish, both cooling them and giving a final blessing that seems half practical, half spiritual. The night breeze carries the briny scent upward, mixed with the earthy perfume of damp wood and woven fibers. Nearby, several men begin securing the baskets onto the canoe. Their motions are smooth, practiced, like a well-rehearsed dance. You notice the careful knots they tie, strong enough to hold in rough currents, simple enough to undo with a swift tug. One man catches you watching and grins. "Every knot is a story," he says. "Some better than others. Mine are usually the dramatic ones." You chuckle, appreciating the quiet humor of someone who's probably rescued many unfortunate tangles. A younger paddler tells you that, long ago, some travelers believed certain fish disliked the open ocean and would try to call storms to discourage long journeys. To keep things smooth, paddlers would hum calming chants to reassure both ocean and cargo. Whether it worked, he adds, depends on who you ask, and how dramatic they are. You look at the baskets of fish and imagine them conspiring with the weather. Cute, in theory. Terrifying, in practice. More people arrive from the village, carrying gifts for exchange. Bundles of fragrant tea leaf, gourds of fermented poi, and intricately woven feather ornaments that catch the lantern light in dazzling bursts. The sight pulls you in, an irresistible collage of colors, textures, and subtle fragrances. The air feels full now, rich with purpose, generosity, and quiet pride. A boy approaches carrying a small carved token and hands it to the tall woman. She examines the carving, a stylized fish inside a crescent moon, and nods approvingly. "A message from the next village," she tells you. "They're expecting us before dawn." She slips the token into a pouch tied at her hip. You imagine these carved symbols passing across miles of ocean, little wooden postcards carrying trust and continuity between communities. There's movement beside you. A group of paddlers gather, speaking softly about wind direction and currents. One traces the coastline in the sand with a stick, marking stopping points where the journey will break for rest or tide shifts. Their voices are calm, measured, the tone of people deeply in tune with the ocean's moods. You lean in slightly, fascinated despite having zero practical ability to predict the behavior of water beyond wet. Historians still argue whether trade routes followed strict, long-established paths or whether they shifted frequently based on alliances, seasonal needs, or environmental changes. Listening to the paddlers describe their plan, you sense flexibility woven with pattern, a map that lives in memory rather than ink. As preparations continue, someone hands you a small sealed leaf packet. You accept it because you are now fully committed to saying yes to mystery offerings. They explain it's dried limu, a little gift, the sort of small token people often send along with fish. It's meant to season food or soothe a sore throat when steeped in warm water. You tuck it carefully into your pocket, feeling oddly honored. The canoe is nearly ready now. Two paddlers stand at its bow, one tapping gently on the hull to listen for any hollow or loose sections. The other checks each lashing, leaning in close, humming quietly in concentration. The woman from earlier steps onto the sand ridge, raising a small conch shell. She blows into it, the sound rising like a pale silver spiral into the night sky. It's not loud, but it's solid, an anchoring note, a call that sounds both ceremonial and practical. You feel the vibration in your chest. People gather to wish the paddlers safe passage. The children from earlier reappear, waving wildly and offering advice like, "Don't fall out," and "Bring back cool stuff." The paddlers nod with saintly patience. The tide begins its slow inward creep. The water darkens, shimmering under the moon in ripples that look like brushed metal. The paddlers step into the shallows, guiding the canoe forward. You wade in too, ankle deep, just to feel the moment more closely. Cool water wraps around your feet, grounding you. The canoe glides forward with smooth determination. At the last moment, one paddler turns and tosses you a grin. "Next time," he says, "maybe you paddle." You laugh, knowing full well they'd end up traveling in circles if you tried. With a sweet, clean slice, the paddles dip. The canoe pushes off, gliding across the pond's surface toward the open channel. Lantern light follows it in a warm arc until the distance swallows the glow. The gifts, the fish, the stories, they're all on their way now, crossing water carved by relationships older than any living memory. You watch until the canoe fades into darkness, the last faint splash echoing like a closing heartbeat. Then you turn back to the shoreline, ready to follow the path forward. You slip back onto the moon-brushed path, the hush of the ocean still humming through your ribcage after watching the canoe vanish into the night. The shoreline curves gently ahead, leading you toward a broader stretch of land where palms sway in a lazy, rhythmic arc, as if they are stretching before settling into bed. Their fronds rustle with long, slow sighs, reminding you of a bored teenager being asked to take out the trash. You can almost hear the eye roll. The terrain levels out into a calm, open space tucked between the pond and the forest. Soft mats of dried lauhala cover the ground in neat squares, arranged around low wooden tables and half-woven baskets. This is clearly a workspace, but at the moment, no one is actively working. Instead, the area glows with the ghost of daytime labor, tools laid out with intention, bundles of materials carefully stacked, half-finished nets draped like enormous spiderwebs waiting for their spinners to return. You settle onto a cool wooden bench, running your fingers across its smooth surface. It's been worn down by decades of use, maybe even generations. A gentle breeze carries the smell of pandanus leaves, grassy, clean, faintly sweet. It feels like sitting inside an herbal tea commercial, minus the smiling person in a white robe. Moments later, the soft shuffle of footsteps approaches. An older man emerges from behind a woven screen, carrying 2 long coils of cord. His hair is streaked with silver, his posture relaxed but precise, like someone who knows he could outwork every person half his age but chooses not to brag about it. He gives you a warm, slightly amused smile, the kind people give to someone who looks like they're trying very hard not to break anything. "You're up late," he says. Or early, depending on how you look at it. He gestures for you to join him near a pile of large, elliptical leaves. You follow, taking a seat across from him. With practiced motions, he begins sorting strands of cord, aligning fibers, smoothing imperfections with the flat of his thumb. His hands are wonderfully steady, the kind of steady that suggests he could thread a needle during an earthquake. He explains that this space is where tools for the pond are made and maintained, nets for trapping, baskets for carrying, ropes for mooring canoes, even intricate traps designed to guide fish towards sluice gates. The work is meticulous, he says, and has always required both skill and patience. Here comes your mainstream historical fact. Traditional fish pond communities often designated specific families or trained individuals to craft and repair essential fishing tools. These roles weren't casual hobbies. They were recognized responsibilities, often passed through generations with great pride. Tools weren't disposable. They were companions to daily life, repaired repeatedly and cared for with reverence. The old man hands you a coil of cord, encouraging you to run your fingers along it. It's softer than you expect, pliable but strong. He tells you it's braided from alona fibers, known in Hawaiian culture for being one of the strongest natural fibers in the Pacific. People used to say a good net begins before the weaving, he tells you. It begins in how well you know your cord. You nod wisely, pretending you have any idea what that means, while quietly acknowledging you would absolutely tangle this cord into a knot so monstrous it would gain sentience. He laughs at your expression. Apparently your inner monologue is not as inner as you hoped. To your right, you notice several wooden stakes carved in elegantly simple shapes. They vary in size but share a similar design: rounded points, wide flat tops, smooth sides. The old man explains that these are markers used within the pond to signal depth changes, feeding zones, or areas needing repair. Some markers are purely functional, others carry carved symbols indicating family responsibility or seasonal cues. You pick one up, surprised by its weight. It feels like holding an heirloom. These tiny decorations, he says, were once carved by board apprentices who weren't yet trusted with real tools. The mini stakes served no purpose, except, apparently, for competing to see who could make the smallest one without breaking it. We still find them in the dirt sometimes, he says with a grin. Proof that teenagers have always been teenagers. You can practically imagine some kid centuries ago squinting at a sliver of wood, muttering, "This is going to be so impressive," right before it snaps. The old man picks up a net that drapes across his lap like a woven waterfall. Each knot is tiny, symmetrical, perfect. Watching him adjust the weave feels like watching calligraphy in motion. Delicate, intentional, unexpectedly soothing. Every tool tells a story, he says softly. If you care for it, it remembers the hands that made it. He shows you how to tie a basic knot used in net making. You try, and it goes about as well as assembling flat pack furniture without instructions. Your knot somehow looks both too loose and too tight. Too many loops and not enough logic. The old man observes your attempt with a neutral expression so expertly crafted it deserves its own award. Then he kindly reworks the knot without commentary. That's real compassion. As he works, he tells you that historians still argue whether different islands followed a standardized tool-making method or if each region developed its own distinct style and technique. Some scholars believe the diversity came from environmental needs. Others argue it was tied to family lineages or political boundaries. The old man shrugs. Maybe both, he says. Or maybe people just like doing things their own way. The night breeze grows cooler, and a long, wandering silence settles between you. But it's a comfortable kind of silence, the kind you only share with someone who doesn't demand conversation to feel connected. You lean back, watching as he finishes the last knots of a new trap. When he holds it up, the net forms an elegant funnel shape, narrow at one end, wide at the other. He explains how the design guides fish naturally inward, encouraging them to keep moving until exiting becomes, well, not an option. You respect the fish, he says. You give them space. You guide them. You don't chase them. That's how the pond works. It's partnership. A soft rustle of palms punctuates his words. He rises slowly and places the finished net onto a rack with several others, then returns to you. Come, he says. There's something else I want to show you. He leads you behind one of the larger woven screens. There, illuminated by a single lantern, stands a beautiful wooden chest. He opens it, revealing a collection of tools old enough to belong in a museum: stone adzes, bone hooks, shell scrapers, and net gauges carved smooth by generations of hands. Each tool still carries a faint glow of use, as though it remembers every tide, every catch, every story. These belong to my grandfather, he says. And his grandfather. And maybe his before that. We don't keep them because they are antique. We keep them because they still teach. You gaze at the chest, unexpectedly moved, feeling the gravity of tradition settle around you like a soft blanket. The old man closes the lid gently, almost ceremonially. He gestures toward the path, inviting you to rise. Come, he says. There's still more of the night waiting. And with the soft glow of his lantern guiding your next steps, you walk deeper into the story. You follow the old man down a narrowing path, the lantern's warm glow bobbing ahead of you like a patient star guiding a very confused traveler. The night has grown richer, deeper, holding itself like a breath. Even the insects seem to hum more quietly now, as if they are gossiping politely rather than yelling their business into the darkness. The air changes as you move, cooler, wetter, infused with a faint mineral scent. The ground begins to slope gently upward beneath your feet. You realize you're approaching a rise overlooking the pond. The old man stops, lifts his lantern, and gestures for you to step ahead of him. You do, and suddenly the world opens. Below you spreads the fish pond in sweeping, luminous stillness. By moonlight, the water glows like black glass. The shoreline curves in a graceful crescent, its edges softened by shadow and pale reflections. The stone wall, those centuries-old, hand-fitted stones, runs like a silver thread across the water's edge, solid and serene. A few torches flicker along the wall where late workers finish their final tasks, their tiny flames dancing like fiery fireflies trying to impress each other. You draw a slow breath. The view is stunning. The old man settles beside you, sinking gracefully into the grass with the confidence of someone whose knees, apparently, have not been plotting mutiny for the last decade. You sit beside him, less gracefully, earning a side glance that might as well say, "That looked painful, but I won't comment." "This," he says, sweeping his hand toward the pond, "is the night watch." You glance at him. "Night watch?" He nods. "Someone always keeps an eye on the water after dark. Even when everything seems calm. Especially then." He points toward the far side of the pond where a faint silhouette moves slowly along the wall, a solitary figure with a torch and long staff. Their pace is unhurried, but purposeful. Here comes your mainstream historical fact. Traditional Hawaiian fish ponds required frequent nighttime vigilance. Tides, storms, predators, wandering animals, or even opportunistic thieves could threaten the pond's delicate balance. Night watchers kept the ecosystem safe, listening for unusual splashes, feeling shifts in wind, smelling subtle changes in the water. This wasn't paranoia, it was responsibility. You watch the patrolling figure for a while. Their torchlight flickers across the water in orange ribbons. Occasionally they pause, leaning close to inspect a section of the wall or listening intently. Their shadow stretches long behind them, stretching into the darkness like a second, taller person who refuses to help. The old man shifts, pulling a gourd from his side pouch. He uncorks it and offers it to you. You take a careful sip. The drink is warm, soothing, earthy, like liquid campfire comfort. You savor the taste, quietly grateful that it isn't one of those invigorating tonics some cultures are infamous for, like fermented fish eyeballs or spicy bark surprise. As you hand the gourd back, he begins telling you a story about the night watch of long ago. "People always think night is for resting," he says. "But the pond doesn't sleep. The fish don't sleep. The water doesn't sleep. You listen differently at night. You feel differently." A breeze drifts across the water, brushing your forehead like a cool hand. You listen, really listen. The pond has a sound. Not loud, not obvious. A soft, steady murmur like something ancient thinking quietly to itself. The old man tells you that, in past generations, night watchers passed down stories of strange creatures that supposedly lurked near the fish pond walls, eels that shone in the dark, fish with glowing eyes, and shadowy shapes moving just below the water's surface. Some people say those stories were warnings, he adds. Others say they were just meant to keep children out of the pond at night. He mentions a particular legend of a ghostly pond cat, a spirit said to roam the walls at night, flicking its tail in irritation whenever people ignored proper maintenance. According to the tale, if you heard a stone clink on its own, that was the cat reminding you to check your work. No one ever saw it, he says, but everyone claimed they did. You grin. Imagine being scolded by a supernatural quality control cat. Honestly, relatable. As you stare at the moonlit water, a question floats into your mind. Were night watchers always assigned? Or was it just whoever felt like staying awake? The old man smiles. That's something historians still argue about. Some believe specific families held the responsibility. Others say it rotated within the community. And some think the role shifted depending on political or environmental changes. But one thing's certain, someone always kept watch. He leans back, resting his hands behind him. You mimic him, though your elbows immediately protest like overworked employees who request to speak with HR. The silence stretches softly. Torches sway in the distance. Somewhere in the forest behind you, a night bird lets out a low, echoing call that sounds like someone blowing across the top of a bottle. Slowly, voices begin drifting toward you from below. Workers finishing their final repairs speak in hushed tones, laughter slipping out in gentle sputters. They move along a narrow walkway by the water, tightening stones, checking sluice openings. Their torchlight ripples across the surface, and for a moment the pond looks as though it's covered in golden scales. One worker steps into the shallows, trousers rolled to his knees. He leans forward, scooping a small amount of water with his palm and sniffing it. The old man nods toward him. Checking the salinity, he explains. Too much fresh water and the pond loses balance. Too much salt and the fish complain. You imagine tiny fish writing strongly worded letters about the conditions. The old man chuckles, as though he heard the joke forming in your mind. You watch as a worker dips a long stick into the water, holding it still. The stick wobbles slightly, then steadies. The old man murmurs that he's checking for currents that shouldn't be there, signs of leaks, or stones shifted out of place. Even a small gap in the wall can let predators in or allow precious fish to escape. You glance at the wall, suddenly appreciating it not as a solid line but as a living boundary constantly negotiating with the ocean. One of the workers notices you and calls out a greeting. He lifts his torch slightly, illuminating his face, a young man with bright eyes and a grin as wide as the horizon. Beautiful night, he says. You agree. He gestures toward the stars. Good light for checking the wall, he adds. Clouds make everything harder. Stones are honest by moonlight. You store that phrase away because it sounds like something you'll pretend to understand later. The workers complete their final pass and begin returning toward the village, their soft chatter fading into the distance. The pond settles into deeper quiet, the kind that makes your chest feel warm and full. You and the old man stay a little longer on the hillside, sharing the stillness. You watch the lone watcher continue their slow patrol. Their torchlight shifts, then darkens, then flares again. The pond mirrors everything. Eventually, the old man stands, brushing grass from his legs. He offers you a hand, not because you look helpless, but because you clearly are. You take it. As he helps you up, he says softly, "There's one more place to see tonight. Follow me." And so you do. You follow the old man down from the hillside, your steps cushioned by soft grass and the lingering calm of the night watch. The lantern in his hand swings gently, sending warm ripples of light across the ground like a traveling sunbeam that missed its bedtime. The path curves through a stand of hollow trees, their long leaves whispering overhead in lazy, overlapping sighs. As you walk, the air begins to thicken, not in a spooky, "you're about to be eaten by something with too many teeth" way, but in that earthy, rich, almost sweet way that promises you're drawing close to soil that's been loved and tended for generations. The old man glances back at you, nodding knowingly. "You'll like this part," he says. He pushes aside a curtain of tall grasses, and suddenly the world opens into a sweeping landscape of cultivated abundance. You step into a sprawling taro patch, its wide green leaves shimmering with dew even under the moonlight. They rise around you like gentle umbrellas, bold and elegant. The water-filled low-eye patches reflect the stars, making it feel as though the sky is quietly soaking at your feet. A warm, earthy scent hangs in the air: mud, water, leaf, thyme. You inhale deeply. It smells like patience. The old man gestures ahead. "Fish ponds don't stand alone," he says. "They're part of a bigger system. Always were." Here comes your mainstream historical fact for this section. Hawaiian fish ponds were traditionally integrated with surrounding agricultural systems, particularly taro farming. Water from streams often flowed through taro patches first, picking up nutrients and silt, before finally reaching the fish pond. The fish benefited from this nutrient-rich flow, and in turn, pond water could be reused to irrigate crops. It was a brilliantly efficient cycle, a sustainable loop built long before the word sustainability began appearing on eco-friendly tote bags. You walk with him along a raised path dividing two low-eye. Small frogs hop away from your feet with tiny plops, like moist punctuation marks. Somewhere nearby, the soft splash of a startled fish echoes faintly through one of the irrigation channels. The old man lifts his lantern, revealing a network of ditches and stone-lined channels weaving gracefully between the patches. "Every stream," he says, "has stories. And every story connects to another." He pauses, dipping his hand into one channel. He lifts it out, letting the water drip from his fingers. The lantern light catches each droplet like melting glass. "This water came from the mountains earlier today," he says. "Tomorrow it'll help feed the fish. After that, the crops. After that, maybe your feet." He grins. You look down at your sandals, suddenly aware they may indeed be participating in the water cycle. As you move deeper into the fields, you begin hearing soft voices. Then you see them, 3 women kneeling beside one of the patches, illuminated by a nearby torch stuck into the ground. They are rhythmically loosening soil with wooden digging sticks, moving with remarkable synchronicity. Even in the dim light, you can see the strength in their arms, the ease in their motions. One woman looks up with a warm smile. "Still wandering?" she asks, clearly recognizing you as the wandering type. You admit this, earning a quiet laugh. She gestures you closer. You join them at the edge of the patch, careful not to slip into the mud, which would definitely be on brand for you. She explains they are removing weeds that grow too aggressively between the kalo stalks. "Night work," she says, "is cooler and peaceful." You watch as they hum softly, their voices carrying the cadence of something old and familiar. The sound blends with the rustle of leaves and the whispering water. It's hypnotic, like a lullaby for the land. One of the women tells you about the kalo itself, how it's not just food, but genealogy. A reminder that care for the land is intertwined with care for lineage. Her hands, caked in fine mud, move with reverence as she tends the plants. She mentions an old belief that if you plant kalo while angry, it will grow stubborn, and take twice as long to harvest. "The land listens," she says with a small smile. "It remembers everything, even moods." You silently vow never to plant anything while irritated ever again. Especially not basil. The women return to their work with steady grace. You linger a moment, soaking in the rhythm of their movements, before continuing along the path. The old man stops near a wooden platform built over one of the larger channels. He steps onto it, leaning on the railing. You join him. Beneath you, the water flows in a smooth, steady ribbon, carrying reflections of stars, torchlight, and the broad silhouettes of taro leaves. This is where choices happen, he says. Water management. Enough for the crops, enough for the pond, enough to keep the stream healthy. It's balance. He explains that some generations built elaborate diversions, small dams, and valves crafted from wood and stone. Others favored simpler systems. Historians still argue whether certain island districts used more complex water management than others, he says, or if those differences came later with population shifts. He shrugs. In the end, people do what the land asks. You lean on the railing, listening to the soft murmuring current. A fish darts through the channel, a small flash of movement. The old man smiles. Sometimes little fish wander into the loai, he says. People used to joke they were checking on the Carlo. You imagine a tiny fish paddling stonily through the fields, inspecting root growth. The old man steps down from the platform and motions for you to follow him to the far edge of the cultivation area. There, you come upon a shallow holding pool where runoff gathers. Fireflies flicker lazily above it, swirling like tiny constellations that forgot which way was up. He tells you that runoff isn't waste. Sediment settles here, enriching the soil. Overflow from heavy rains is captured, slowed, guided. Nothing is lost if you listen closely enough to the land's instructions. He kneels and dips his hand into the pool. You kneel beside him, doing the same. The water is warm, silky with silt. This is the part most people don't see, he says softly. When you look at a fish pond, you see stone walls and water. But everything up here, he gestures to the fields, the channels, the forest line, everything feeds that pond. You look at the vast, interconnected fields, alive with water, plants, insects, birds, and feel something shift in your chest. Understanding, maybe. Or the realization that your apartment plants never stood a chance. The old man rises, brushing his hands on his trousers. Come, he says again. There's still more night to walk. You take one last look at the Carlo fields, at the shimmering leaves, the whispering water, the patient hands working in the dark, before following him toward the next bend in the path. You follow the old man as the cultivated fields taper off into a quieter, wilder edge of the landscape. The lantern's glow bobs along beside you, carving out a soft golden bubble in the darkness. Here, the sounds shift, less the tidy murmur of channels and more the loud symphony of crickets, distant surf, and the low, breathy rustle of wind slipping through ironwood branches. The ground becomes sandier underfoot, warmer too, as though holding tight to the day's memory. You smell the ocean more distinctly now, a sharper, saltier scent that rolls in waves even before the shoreline comes into view. The old man looks back at you with a grin that suggests he enjoys dramatic reveals. He steps aside and lifts the lantern high. What you see steals a quiet breath from you. Before you stretches the wide, starlit shoreline where the fish pond meets the open sea. The break in the stone wall, the channel, glistens like a silver vein connecting the two bodies of water. To your right, a large wooden platform sits suspended above the sand, anchored by thick posts. On it rest piles of fishing gear, throw nets, baskets, hooks fashioned from bone and shell, gourds, and coils of rope neatly arranged like sleeping serpents. But what captures your attention most is the half-circle of people gathered around a low fire pit, its flames crackling softly. They sit on woven mats, sharing food, conversation, and laughter in the hush of the late night. The Mackay cruise, the old man says. Ocean fishes. They work with the pond, not apart from it. You approach, the fire warming your face as someone hands you a small wooden bowl. Inside is warm fish steamed with seaweed. Simple, fragrant, delicious. You take a bite and instantly decide you would betray several principles to eat this regularly. One of the fishes, a woman with hair braided down her back, gestures toward the channel. "We're heading out soon," she says. "Tide's shifting." You glance at the water. Indeed, the current is beginning to pull outward, the pond releasing its gentle breath into the open sea. Here comes your mainstream historical fact. Fish ponds were not isolated from traditional open ocean fishing practices. Communities often balanced both, using ponds for consistent, controlled yields and the ocean for seasonal catches and larger fish. Knowledge of currents, lunar cycles, and migratory patterns shaped how and when people fished the open sea, complementing the pond's steady supply. A man sitting beside you begins mending a throw net, his fingers moving with a speed that makes you feel like your own hands evolved for dropping things. The fibers whisper as he works, the net rippling like liquid lace. He nods toward your bowl. "Good fish?" he asks. You give an enthusiastic yes, maybe too enthusiastic, because he laughs and says, "Eat slow. The ocean's not going anywhere." Another fisher sets down a carved wooden implement shaped like a flattened paddle. She explains it's a lure used for nighttime aqua fishing, designed to gleam under moonlight and attract curious fish. The surface is inlaid with tiny chips of shell that sparkle like fragments of stars. She passes it to you, and you hold it carefully. It's smooth and surprisingly heavy. The inlaid shells glow faintly in the firelight, hypnotic and beautiful. She tells you that some fishers believed particular shells carried better luck, especially if gifted rather than carved yourself. She mentions that one mischievous fisher long ago used to swap out people's lure shell with plain pebbles as a prank. Apparently he found this hilarious. The victims did not. He got caught when someone used a pebble lure and still caught more fish than everyone else, she says, shaking her head. The ocean was in a very sarcastic mood that day. You're beginning to suspect that ancient fishing communities had the same chaotic energy as any modern group chat. A young boy approaches the fire carrying a small basket. He opens it to reveal polished stone weights used to hold lines steady. He offers them to the fishers, who sort through them, selecting ones with just the right weight and shape. You pick one up. It fits your palm perfectly, cool and solid. The old man explains that certain stones were favored for their density or their feel. Fishers often recognize their own weights by touch alone. You imagine a stone adopted like a pet rock, except genuinely useful. Conversation swirls gently around you. Discussions of tides, moonrise timing, reef conditions, and stories from recent trips. Someone jokes about a boat full of fishers arguing over whether a shape on the horizon was a cloud or a rival canoe. "It was a cloud," he adds with a sigh. "A cloud we argued with for 30 minutes. You laugh, not because it's ridiculous, but because you know you would absolutely have been part of that argument. A lull settles over the group. Some begin preparing the canoes for departure, inspecting paddles, tightening lashings, checking nets for imperfections. The fire crackles behind you, orange sparks drifting upward like tiny upward fleeing thoughts. One of the elder fishers joins you by the channel. "You know," he says, "this place, it's conversation. The pond talks to the ocean. The ocean talks back. Always." You look at the water, and suddenly it does feel like dialogue. One body giving, one body receiving, exchanging minerals, life, motion, and energy in soft, ancient negotiation. He continues, "People think the pond pulls fish from the ocean, or pushes fish toward it. But really, it's more like an invitation. A suggestion." You imagine the pond leaning toward the sea saying, "Hey, wanna hang out?" And the ocean shrugging, "Sure, I've got time." The elder glances at you. Historians still argue whether the channel designs in some ponds were shaped over centuries or built in single monumental efforts. They debate angles, flow rates, moon cycles. But ask any fisher what matters most. He nods toward the water. And they'll say, "Watch the tide." Slowly, the Mackay crew begins gathering near the canoes. Nets are slung over shoulders. Torches are dimmed or extinguished. Voices fall to whispers, respecting the night and the sea's temperament. The air shifts. You feel it, a subtle tightening, a call. The woman with the braided hair steps into the shallows. "Want to help push?" she asks you. You blink. You? Participating? Bold move. You accept before your good judgment has time to protest. Together, with half the crew, you push the canoe toward the water. The sand sucks gently at your heels. The canoe glides forward, its wooden hull whispering against the tide. When the water reaches your knees, the fishes climb in one by one with effortless grace. Then they pause, waiting. The braided woman nods to you. "Step back now." You retreat to the shoreline, breath held. The paddles dip. The canoe surges forward. The crew glides into the channel, lantern light catching the spray. They move in smooth unity, barely disturbing the water. Within moments, they pass the mouth of the pond and slip into the open sea. A faint call echoes back toward you, a warm, grateful farewell. The old man places a hand on your shoulder. "Good timing," he says. You shared a moment most people never see. You watch until the canoe becomes another moving shadow on the horizon. Only then do you turn away, leaving the shoreline behind, its fire, its tools, its ocean breath, following the lantern deeper into the night's final stretch. You follow the old man back along the shoreline path, your feet brushing through cool sand that seems to hush its own sound out of respect for the night. The canoe's distant silhouette has already blended into the horizon, leaving only the rhythmic pulse of waves and the soft hiss of water against the stones. You feel the lingering tug of the moment, the quiet privilege of having watched a crew slip into the sea as calmly as someone stepping through their own front door. But the old man doesn't stop. He turns inland, guiding you toward a low rise that overlooks both the pond and the ocean. You climb beside him, the incline gentle, the night wind brushing your cheeks like the world reminding you, yes, you're still here, even if your mind is drifting somewhere older. When you reach the ridge, you pause. Below, the entire fish pond spreads like a dark mirror. Moonlight skims its surface, turning it into one vast sheet of silver glass. Even the Makaha gate appears serene, the water moving through it with a softness that defies the complexity you've learned tonight. Across the way, the glow of torches still flickers faintly where the upland crew continues repairs, patient and precise. It feels like looking at a living system in one breath, a place where engineering, culture, and environment merge so completely that picking them apart would feel like unraveling a woven mat thread by thread. The old man sits on the grass, patting the spot beside him. You lower yourself into the soft greenery, which smells faintly of earth and sea mist. People visit fish ponds now, he says, and sometimes they think of them as artifacts, things frozen in time. But they were living, changing, adapted every season. He gestures toward the Makaha below. This gate alone would shift a little each year. Boards replaced. Stones adjusted. Nets modified. Communities learned from storms, from droughts, from migrations. Nothing stayed still. You nod, feeling the truth of it settle into your bones. The pond isn't just a place, it's a practice. Here's a bit of history for you, he adds, settling deeper into the grass. In the 19th century, when trade and Western influence reshaped daily life in Hawaii, the management of fish ponds evolved, too. Some ponds expanded their techniques, adapting to new materials like metal nails or different types of rope. Some became commercial, supplying fish to growing port towns. He pauses, giving you a sideways grin. And some ponds hired bookkeepers. Yes, bookkeepers. Imagine trying to balance the books while also factoring in fish migration and moon phases. Talk about a job that needs hazard pay. You laugh, imagining a tired clerk muttering, "Did the mullet expense really exceed the surplus again?" while rubbing their temples. The old man leans back, hands behind his head. But not all changes came easily. Overuse, introduced species, shifting regulations, all these things reshaped ponds, sometimes helping, sometimes harming. Historians still argue whether certain 19th century alterations improved long-term sustainability or if they disrupted delicate ecological rhythms. You watch the pond quietly. It seems timeless from up here, but the old man's words remind you that even timeless things feel the push and pull of human hands. A night bird calls overhead, sharp, quick, and a little dramatic, like it's auditioning for a mysterious soundtrack. Another joke bubbles in your mind. Maybe it just wants to be included in whatever's happening tonight. Bird FOMO, you whisper. The old man chuckles. Below, the water shifts again, a gleam of movement rippling near the center. You narrow your eyes, trying to make it out. The old man hums thoughtfully. Mullet schooling, he says. They do that sometimes at night. Safe in the shallows. Some folks used to say that if mullet moved in perfect circles under the full moon, it meant the pond was feeling mischievous and planning to flood itself at the next high tide. He smirks. Total nonsense, of course. But the fun kind. You decide that if ponds could have moods, this one would be in a peaceful, slightly smug state, like it knows it's impressive. A breeze slides across the ridge. The grass whispers. The stars shimmer. You feel the long night settling into a gentler rhythm now, everything slowing, softening. The old man rises and gestures for you to follow. One last place, he says. A good one to end the night. You walk a short distance to a small outcropping of stones where the view opens fully to the horizon. The moon is sinking, tinting the world in pale amber. The ocean looks softer, the pond calmer, the night lighter. Stand here, he says, and listen. You do. At first you hear only the wind. Then the ponds hush. Then the distant, steady heartbeat of the ocean. Together, they weave a loud sound, the land, the water, the life between them, all merging into something steady and ancient. You close your eyes. And for a moment, it feels like the entire landscape breathes with you. The old man speaks softly now, his voice nearly blending into the wind. Everything you saw tonight, the gates, the channels, the tools, the work, the stories, it's all part of the same conversation. People and place. Practice and patience. Knowledge passed down until it becomes instinct. You sense him step back, giving you space. Keep that with you, he adds. When you open your eyes, the horizon has begun to lighten with the earliest hint of dawn. Just a faint wash. A suggestion of morning. Your journey, for now, has reached its resting point. You take one last look at the fish pond, a calm bowl of silver nestled between land and sea, and then turn from the ridge, letting the night hold you as its final minutes slip away. The ridge fades behind you as you walk, the path soft beneath your feet, each step a little slower than the last. The night has thinned into something almost weightless, a gentle veil drifting toward morning. The air feels warmer now, smoothing over you with the quiet patience of a world settling into rest. Even the wind seems to lift its voice only in soft breaths, as though careful not to disturb the calm that has wrapped itself around you. The sounds you heard before, the the splash of fish, the murmur of nets, the laughter from the shoreline, seem to drift farther away, becoming memories that float just behind your thoughts. They settle there softly, like small shells collected in your pocket, warm from being held. The pond, the ocean, the people you met tonight, all of them loosen their hold on your attention, not disappearing, just easing into a distant glow. The landscape stretches out in long, slow shapes, blurred by the comfort that tugs at your eyelids. Even the stars seem to dim themselves a little, offering a final shimmer before sinking into the pale rise of dawn. Your breath moves in an easy rhythm, matching the slow pull of the tide. Each inhale draws in a little more stillness. Each exhale lets go of whatever weight remained from the day. The quiet becomes almost luminous, a soft cradle of sound and silence. You feel the last threads of wakefulness unwinding, slipping gently toward rest. There is nothing left to do, nowhere left to go. Just the slow, familiar warmth of your own breathing, and the sense that the world has softened around you. Let it all drift now. Let the night close gently. Sweet dreams.